Hey there, friend. Welcome back to Daily Dose Radio here in the Bible Bistro. Well, this is your home for organic Bible study that's fresh and delicious. Remember now, this is 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week, studying the Psalms verse by verse. And I don't promise that it'll just be 5 minutes because so often I run over that a little bit. But that's just, I get excited sometimes about the teaching the Psalms. So here we are. Psalm 142. So we're going to look at the 7 verses in this psalm this week. This is a maskil of David, and I want to talk about that a little bit too. Let me go ahead and just read the verses, and then we'll talk about the introduction a little bit. Verses 1 and 2 today. I cried unto the Lord with my voice, and with my voice unto the Lord did I make my supplication. I poured out my complaint before him. I showed before him my trouble. All right. Well, that's verses 1 and 2. And as I said, this is a maskil. Some of your translations will have this. Some won't. I don't really understand why some don't put the introductions on these psalms, but they don't. But this one says a maskil of David. And maskil just means a teaching psalm. Well, that's what some translations will give you, a teaching psalm. A maskil is it's a participle of a verb, which means a thing that makes you wise, or one that makes you wise. So this psalm is one that makes you wise, or it can also be translated one that makes you skillful. No one's really sure about the meaning of the word maskil, but for a very, very long time, the church has translated this as a teaching psalm. So there's something to be learned here. Then we have a little description of when this is written. We know that it's of David, so it's by his hand, and it says a prayer when he was in the cave. Now, the cave is the question. What cave are we talking about? And I have just pulled out 3 different caves that might be, a part of this story. And the first one is in, 1 Samuel chapter 22, verse 1. Let me pull up my 1 Samuel passages here. Here we go. 1 Samuel 22, 1. David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. So the cave of Adullam might be the cave that's spoken of here. It could also be the cave that he was in when he was in Gedi. That's in 1 Samuel chapter 24. And there it says, and it came to pass when Saul was returned from falling the Philistines, that it was told him, saying, Behold, David is in the wilderness of En-gedi. Then Saul took 3,000 men, 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel, and went to seek David and his men upon the rocks of the wild goats. And he came to the sheepcotes by the way, where was a cave, and Saul went in to cover his feet, and David and his men remained in the sides of the cave. Okay, so that's cave number 2. Cave number 3 is in 1 Samuel chapter 23, which is before that. And in verse 25, it says, Saul and his men went to seek David, and they told David wherefore he came down into a rock. Now, it could be that into a rock means a cave. And so these are just 3 possibilities of caves where David may have gone to hide himself. It's a possibility. And I'm not sure that the one in En-gedi is a possibility because he probably didn't stay in that cave very long. Well, we know he didn't stay in that cave very long, and maybe he didn't go back to that cave. But the cave Adullam may be the one, because all during this period in 1 Samuel, we have him in different caves. Saul is pursuing him. And so when we read this psalm, we know that David is writing about his persecution under the hand of Saul. So we know specifically what this prayer is about, who it's by, and whether it's in the cave of Adullam or the cave of Maon or in the cave in En-gedi. It's probably that David is writing about his persecution. So you can imagine that you're having to live in a cave. You're used to living in a home, and then in a palace, and then in your own house, but now in a cave. What's going on here? Why is he being persecuted to this extent? And so David, in a cave, when he used to have the pleasures of a home, is now living on rocks and living in places that are not comfortable and cold and damp and, all the rest that comes with living in a cave. And so we get this prayer, and it's a prayer. And actually, this is not a song or a psalm, but this is a prayer of David. And so he says, I cried unto the Lord with my voice unto the Lord did I make my supplication. I poured out my complaint before him. I showed him before him my trouble. Okay, so he says, I showed with my voice my complaint, my supplication, and my trouble. So we know all of this is happening in David's life, and the reason for it, and he voices it. And he doesn't say that I said it to my best friend or to my wife or to whoever, my confidant. He says it to the Lord. He says, I cried to the Lord. To the Lord I made my supplication. I poured out my complaint before him and showed him my trouble. You see how often the Lord is in this? It's to the Lord that he makes this. He makes that very clear. So his prayer is a prayer of complaint made to the Lord. And ladies and gentlemen, we too can make this same kind of prayer. Everything's been stripped from him, and all he has now is prayer. And so he goes to the Lord and he makes his complaint. This is a good lesson for us. So if this is a teaching psalm, what are we being taught? That in our greatest and deepest need, it's time to call on the Lord. All right, that's where we begin. Now we'll pick up tomorrow with verses 3 and 4. So I hope you'll join me then here on Daily Dose Radio.